All right, looks like I'm live. Can I get a mic check or a comment to say you guys can see and hear me? Hello. Okay, awesome. Very cool. Well, thank you all for having me here today. Zach, Jason, it's a pleasure to be here. This is my third presentation with you guys now. The last one, I believe, sometime in like October or September, and I wish I had so much more exciting news to share with you in terms of my project update. But for many of you who haven't maybe seen this presentation before, I'm excited to introduce you to who I am and the project that I'm working on. So I was born and raised in Ontario, a smaller community outside of Toronto. And my profession is a landscape designer. Throughout that, I've owned a company for the last 8 years. Really quite interested in sustainability and sustainable house construction, everywhere from cob to straw bale to tree houses. I really was quite fascinated about that, and quite naturally fell into the world of tiny houses as well. There was a period in my life, maybe 4 years ago now, where I decided to buy a camper van and travel the United States. And the purpose of that trip was, to find a little bit of my own authentic self, but also to look for and study all of the amazing and unique tiny home communities, eco villages, permaculture design centers, really anywhere that is experimenting with sustainable or alternative living lifestyles. That brought me on a pretty epic journey throughout that amazing country, and ended up stumbling as I kind of rounded from the East Coast back towards Ontario. I stumbled upon British Columbia and a small mountain town called Revelstoke. Can I get a show of hands here? Maybe has anyone heard of Revelstoke? If you're new to the place, it's a pretty epic mountain town. We got like one of the highest elevations of vertical skiing. Oh, nice. We got someone from Golden. Hello, Jill. Yeah, then you'll know Revelstoke pretty well. It's a pretty magical place. We're surrounded by the Monashee, the Selkirk, and the Tangier Mountains, all in this epic bowl where some of the coolest people I've ever met live. And about in 2017, we installed our new Revelstoke Mountain Resort. And with that, like many resort communities, experiences a variety of affordability challenges when you attract many people to your small town. Stats Canada will say that we have 7,500 people living here, but we did recently a TELUS survey data that showed closer to 15,000 people living in our community, and some of them traveling from all over the world, others working in various industries like timber or the dam. But today it seems like the market has really changed towards a lot of these adventure tourists and people looking for the epic lifestyle that living in Revelstoke can provide. So naturally, I came to fall in love with this place, and it's like many Canadian communities, we kind of find a place where we want to put our roots down. But what we're seeing in this country and really across the world is an affordability issue. The housing crisis is no longer the target issue of our day. It's really everything from gas to food to our jobs. That things have become more expensive, and like many of you have found that tiny houses are a really great solution to addressing that challenge. So when I came to Revelstoke, looking at the town here, I really wanted to live here. And it took me about a year to find a rental. I ended up going home and coming back to a neighboring community in Kamloops to sort of get my feet in the ground here and meet some people and learn about the town. And I eventually found a rental for the winter. At that point, it was $600 a month for a basement apartment, a 2-bedroom. So it was really quite, affordable for me at that time, especially coming out of living out of a van. It was nice to have a shower and a queen size bed and the amenities of a house. But then, I really started to get quite passionate about, looking at this affordability and housing issue And what could I do to address it? I'm just a landscape designer with an interest in all of this, but is there anything that I could do to be a part of the solution? So I started coming up with a number of concepts, and I took a permaculture design course on Vancouver Island, and really started to play around with some of the ideas that I was thinking about. And naturally, that led me to the creation of the Microhome initiative. Really, the focus of this project is to look at how can we create affordable housing and ensure that the housing is affordable for the long term. So I'll share my screen here. I've got a presentation to share with you. And so yes, this is the Microhome initiative. And I think the big value that I add to this endeavor is the ability to render and create visualizations that can help bring people on board to a project. Affordability, the housing crisis, these are huge topics that are really difficult for people to wrap their heads around. And ultimately, we need a plan in order to see how that is established. That today is an evolving challenge, but I'll show you the renderings and the kind of the purpose of this project. So this is the project that I started on. I really wanted to look at can we create a pocket community of small homes and create them in a model of perpetual affordable home ownership. This is something I'll get to in a second, but also develop it in a way where we have sustainability and lifestyle practices of a regenerative place to live as some of the core foundations of the environment we're choosing to live in and present to our neighbors. So some of the initial questions I had were, okay, well, how big do these houses have to be? What's appropriate for the demographics of the people here? What amenities inside of the homes and outside of the homes shared among the community would be important to our residents? What would it cost to create something like this? And how can we ensure that this is perpetually affordable? So we started doing a little study about the available land in the community. And as a pilot project, I really wanted to demonstrate how we can utilize urban land within a community. So this is in denser populated areas. I know in some of the concepts I'll show you later, we have acreages to work with, and you can do some really beautiful and creative things with a lot of space. But looking at smaller land masses, what can we do to create home ownership where in traditional zoning and parcel subdividing, there are minimum lot sizes, there are minimum house sizes, and that ultimately creates this sort of urban sprawl of grid-like patterns of streets that take up a lot of space, but maybe aren't using them as effectively. So there is an argument here to, in denser populations, maybe we should be building up and really densifying. But this is trying to find that happy medium, that blend between enjoying your outdoor environment, enjoying your own single detached home, because I still believe that that's what a lot of us have grown up with, are dreaming about owning and wanting in our lives. The reality for the future is that that is a privilege that many of us human beings on this planet may not ever have the privilege of having moving forward. So how can we still have those deep desires to own our own home, but do so affordably? So looking at this old school, which has recently been turned into offices and a restaurant. If you're ever in Revelstoke, go to the old school eatery. It's absolutely amazing. Then they have this additional school property, the soccer fields here. And if we were to look at how the city would traditionally subdivide this land, they would create about 16 parcels here on that square block. And what I'm proposing here, instead of 16 single family homes on this lot, we're able to propose 8 homes on 6 lots. And so this is the concept plan here. And the focus of this is, how can we change a few paradigms here so that we're creating something different, but also familiar to what we as consumers want to buy, but also what we're sort of looking for in a community. So the big thing that I wanted to address, first of all, is just how we approach the home. If you look at the suburbs or really any house in North America, you'll notice one familiar attribute is that we have streets that turn into driveways, driveways to front doors. And ultimately what that does is it creates this relationship between you and your vehicle and not your community. And in order to connect with your community, you have to go to a park or walk down the sidewalk and confront someone head on. And ultimately, that doesn't lead to a natural conversation or an opportunity to really connect with the people that you live with in your neighborhood, your space. So I really wanted to address this by changing the paradigm a little bit, by putting parking relatively close to the homes, but within a very short walking distance to the front doors, which I hope encourages individuals to walk in front of others' homes and connect with them inside of these social spaces. Yeah, and feel free to ask questions along the way. I'll answer them as they come through. This particular concept here, Ernest, is on the grid. And that's the intention here, is how can we utilize all of the available amenities within this property to connect them in the most affordable way. And so each of these homes facing into these central courtyards also connect to this central community center space. And the idea with this space is it's open, dynamic area that the community can utilize at their free will. So if they wanted to hold yoga sessions or meditation, maybe even massage therapy or your strata meetings to come together, potlucks, really it's a flexible space for them to utilize it in the best way possible. Other amenities, we've chosen to add some additional buildings on the property here. This could be used as a shared storage area, maybe even a workshop, garage, could be a co-working space, it could be daycare or nursery. And again, the intention here is that these other people that live in this space get to make those own decisions about how they utilize it. So us as designers and builders, we can provide them the framework in which they live, but it's ultimately up to the community and their strata council to decide how that is best utilized to suit those people. So a couple other amenities that I really wanted to focus on are a few of the landscaping features. So a big part of this and how we live sustainably is teaching us how to live sustainably. We are typically going to grocery stores, buying food, and that relationship is disconnecting us from where food actually comes from. It comes from the ground, and we can grow that on our properties. And this hub, this little village, could also be an educational source for the wider community. So a few of the other amenities that I feel are important would be to suggest maybe an orchard of fruit trees along the property boundary here, which you'll see I've expanded the interlocking paving off of the sidewalk to actually invite the surrounding community to come into the property and take an apple or a peach or a pear, and it allows the community to integrate so that it's not this gated community. One of the main paradigms I really wanted to change here as well is there's no fences, right? And I think this notion that big, tall fences make for good neighbors is just a ploy to distract us from good, strong community and communication within that community. And what we're able to achieve here is a space that is creating home ownership for you in that home, but the rest of the property is in commons and in shared responsibility of its residents. On this side here, we have some garden globes here, which I think is just a unique demonstration of how we can use vertical growing to intuitively and innovatively grow in the spaces that are difficult to grow in, especially in a space that is quite filled up with a lot of the homes and paths in these areas. So how do we best use that area? I've got compost and maybe a greenhouse over here, possibly a chicken coop with some more compost over here. But then what uniquely is beside each of the homes too, we have this sort of catch basin for planting areas. So they serve a multiple purposes, which is a unique thing for permaculture, is how can we use one feature to have multiple amenities to it. So for example, these green bubbles here, they can catch rainwater or stormwater runoff. They can also be a composting bed or a shared garden for that individual homeowner to use. But it also provides beautification and privacy between the two homes. So this is our concept here is, if land and houses are becoming too expensive for one person to own, can we as a community come together and decide to purchase land and develop it ourselves in shared commons to spread the cost of development and infrastructure among all of its residents? And so the strategy here would be to develop this parcel as a bare land strata. That allows us to have individual ownership of each of these homes, but have the remainder of the property in shared common. It also ensures that we are following kind of traditional opportunities for individuals to grow into the middle class and create some stability in their housing options. So for example, you'd be able to get a mortgage, you'd be able to get insurance, and you'd have a freehold title to each of these homes. And then as a strata community, you would elect a council, and that council would represent your community to the greater community to address things like, are we going to pay to have our grass cut or our gardens maintained? Are we going to pay to have the snow removal? Or are we going to come together as a community and decide to save on those costs and do them ourselves? Which theoretically, I hope is a path a community like this would take, so that we have shared ownership and responsibilities to each other and to our space, which creates more community and connection. But if paying for it ensures that this place remains beautiful, then I think that is a really, really great option too. And so looking at agriculture as a big part of this project, on this land, we'd have these 6 grow spheres. These are unique products you can actually buy from download from IKEA, and you can take this to a CNC machinist and they'll cut out all the parts, and you simply just put them together and it creates this really unique glow globe, and then you can run irrigation through it, which I think is a really cool opportunity to not only grow the space and grow food for your community, but show it off as an architectural feature, and even create maybe a little bit of a sitting area inside there too, which is kind of fun. Other areas like the fruit trees, the food forests in between the homes, which if you've never heard of a food forest before, it's this concept of trying to replicate nature in a manicured environment of our design. And that would allow us to, grow upper story trees like walnuts and cherries, and then have lower story trees like pears and apples, and then below that you'd have currants and blueberries and raspberries, and even below that you'd have strawberries, and down below mushrooms and other root vegetables, all growing in one kind of unique bio environment, which I think is a really, really cool way to address food security, but also beautification and the education of this space. I think one unique attribute that agriculture, in what I believe should be developed in every single development, is that it creates intergenerational relationships too, right? It allows the seniors to connect with the youth and show them how it's done, get your hands dirty and work together, which I think is lacking in a lot of our modern communities. When seniors get older, we put them in older age homes. When single mothers have kids, they struggle to find daycare. I think it's important that we, to create a strong and successful society, is that we're there to pick each other up. And that's what I hope these communities can do. So some of the amenities, like I shared, a building like this could really take any shape or form. I've chosen a flat roof here to demonstrate some rooftop growing. but it could really be anything from lounge areas, dining spaces, game spaces, anywhere that that community size is important to them and how they would utilize that space. A big part of this is, well, what do these houses look like and what is important in these homes? And so through our research, we kind of identified some main demographics of Revelstoke. First being the single parent families, seniors, and first-time homeowners. A lot of the community in Revelstoke, love this place, but for whatever reason, based mainly affordability, they can't live here any longer. Seniors are owning big houses that they can no longer maintain because there's nothing to downsize to. Or young people like myself are trying to move to this community. I work remotely, and the housing affordability is really challenging. So how do we get new blood into this community that ultimately serves volunteer organizations and all of the jobs in the community? How do you ensure that they have a stake in this town as well? So we identified that each of these houses should, at a minimum, have a 2-bedroom option. That would allow a single parent family to have space to raise a family. It would allow an individual to work from home and have an office, or just add more community members and more bedrooms to this community. So each of these houses are about 500 square feet in size, with 150 square foot porch here, which I feel is really important for Revelstoke, because we kind of live in and out of our homes quite often, and storing snowboards or skis and kind of having that separation so that you're not necessarily having to shovel directly in front of your front door, because there are some days out of my house here, I've had to literally shovel my way out of the house. So that this is a great opportunity to create a house that is attractive. And then architecturally, I've chosen, to kind of showcase a lot of like wood and wood products that is really quite an industry here in our community. So this is sort of the blend that we're trying to establish here between an eco-village and ownership, right? So somewhere on this dynamic, we have the eco-village where everyone share everything. They may not necessarily even have home ownership, that they're just kind of living in a shared space, eating together, cleaning together, growing food together. And that in itself can be a very, very beautiful and enriching lifestyle. But for many of us modern Americans, it can be quite scary to connect with neighbors on that level constantly. I've lived in eco-villages for a few weeks at a time, and I'm quite open-minded, but find that I struggle sometimes with needing my own space, needing to just cook my own meals, because those are the things that make me happy. And so what I'm trying to establish now is this blend where we are able to have all these things by choice, but also have the necessity of affordable home ownership in Canada and the United States. So again, on the other end of the spectrum, you have home ownership, right? And you've got fences and driveways that kind of disconnect us from our communities. And we're in our society today, it's becoming so important for us to connect and create relationship, because there are just so many things trying to divide us and create differences among us, that I believe that these spaces can really help to kind of partner us and blend us back together as one larger global community. And so somewhere in the middle there, I believe there's an opportunity that hasn't yet been fully addressed, where we have the connection to our neighbors, but we also have connection to an opportunity that allows us to create wealth as Canadians and Americans. Home ownership is essential to developing the middle class, and I'm afraid that today that's becoming a dream that many people may not ever have the opportunity. So that's why these projects, I feel, are very important. So this is just a final view of a night shot and the Begbie Mountains in the back. Really what I hope to be is a very beautiful place to live. So this seems to be a slide here that I change quite frequently. I developed it in 2019, but Take it with a grain of salt because it changes drastically constantly. But what I hope to identify here is a target, a goal, which may not be completely realistic, but it's something that I hope, with the help and support of our communities and our governments, that we can achieve. So if, for example, about an acre, 3/4 of an acre would cost $600,000. Currently, I'm looking at a project right now where we can purchase 3 acres for $800,000, which allows us to do a lot more creative stuff. I'll show you in a moment. And then, if we were to look at, creating these small homes, I recognize that $200 a square foot for the creation of housing is probably not realistic anymore. Probably getting closer up to $400 a square foot. But again, let's use this as a case study of what we think should be appropriate for home ownership. So about $1 million for the houses, about $250,000 for the amenities of buildings, landscaping, utilities, and legal, kind of calculated roughly at 20% of the total construction costs. We're looking at, if we were to develop these 8 homes on that small piece of property for $2 million, we could, in theory, create each house at $250,000. So, back in the post-World War days, housing used to be this affordable, and individuals who worked an industry job, were able to afford a home, and that essentially created our baby boom generation of many of our parents, or many of us included, that were able to afford home ownership. But that is now no longer a possibility. As we see here in Revelstoke, we have in 2016, the houses were, on average, $376,000. What you can see here as we go through the years up to today, we see this trend that is really quite exponential, where we're seeing this astronomical rise in pricing for home ownership, which between the last 6 years has been a 95% increase. And yes, Lehman, these are Canadian dollars. And so for an average price in Revelstoke, is about $734,000. I'm sure, Jill, you're seeing something very similar in Golden as well. And so that's not even really including what, COVID-19 has done for 2022. I believe that Stats Canada has forecasted a 20% increase in housing, which I believe today the average house in Canada costs $816,000. The particular challenge I think Revelstoke is experiencing is that these are really actually the only houses that are quite available. When I say quite available, are only available. I bought my house for $339,000 in 2019. And today, my neighbors are selling for $550,000. And so it's a huge increase that I don't believe is sustainable. And it's not appropriate for any community to expect that they're going to be able to maintain the jobs and the opportunities that they currently have. So looking at, what a $734,000 house is about 90% of our residents can no longer afford that mortgage. So if we were able, in theory, create a $250,000 house, we would expect to have a monthly mortgage about $1,100 plus a strata fee, anywhere between $100. And so with 50% down at 20%, if you're a first-time home buyer, you could potentially get it for even less of a down payment. Your required income would be $53,000. That would open up quite a bit of an opportunity for a lot of residents working and owning an average income for the community. It doesn't fully address the low-income individuals, but possibly within these developments, there could be a rental aspect and a rent-to-own opportunity. So one of the things I didn't discuss yet was the perpetual affordable home ownership model. And the idea behind that, I'm going to share a video here quickly of just that space. Can you guys see this video? Give me a quick check. Maybe I need to stop my sharing. Okay, I can't see the comments anymore, but I'll just go forward. And so the idea behind a perpetual affordable home ownership model is this concept that we need to take housing out of the speculative market. So if every year an investor is expecting to make 20%, on their value of their home, that is by far the greatest investment available anywhere. And that needs to stop because it's just not realistic to creating that same opportunity years down the road. And so by creating a perpetual home ownership model, we're creating a development that exists outside of the speculative market. So if, for example, you were to purchase one of these homes at $250,000, that would ensure, sorry, I just definitely need to check. You guys can share the specific window. You know what? Maybe I'll just, could you guys hear me in that whole? Okay, yes, you can hear me. Sorry, folks. It takes away my screen, so I can't really see if I'm seeing you. But I'm just going to share my screen here again. You can see this video. It might be a little choppier. Okay, you can see me, but not the video. I assure you can see the video now. Sorry about the choppiness. Yeah, so the perpetual affordable home ownership model allows us to take that out of the speculative market and create opportunities that ensure it's available for future generations. So if you were able to purchase a house for $250,000 today, you can now afford a house 10 years later for maybe, $300,000. Because what we're accounting for is a percentage of increase that is not 20%, but more along the lines of interest, inflation, and maintenance on the house. This last year, because of COVID-19, we've seen an inflation of 6%. But on traditional years, it's much lower. So if we account for maybe a percentage increase of 3 to 5% every year, you can expect that house to still have a relative investment on the value of your home and your investment, but you're not getting this runaway prices where you're going to walk away from this with an extra $200,000-$300,000 in your pocket after living in your home for 3 years. What this does allow you, though, is to buy in low, save your money instead of putting it towards rent, and build some equity, develop relationships with banks, have that relationship that you can then transition as a stepping stone into bigger and later developments, which I still feel have an important intrinsic value to developing the middle class. But currently there are no stepping stone opportunities in Canada, period. And that needs to change. Something needs to happen. And so uniquely, some of the things that are happening right now are the Canadian government just released their 2022 budget, and affordable housing is a big ticket item in that budget. Some of the things that they're investing in right now is co-housing. They haven't invested in co-housing the last 30 years, and they seem quite excited to reinvest in that. However, my experience of working with the government so far has been quite challenging. Like many of you are saying here, Chris says Canada is very rigid and very behind, and that is very much the case. So for the past 3 years, as I've been sharing these concepts, developing relationships with builders and developers and landowners, primarily I've been trying to develop relationships with politicians and stakeholders in our community, make this a reality. And most recently, about a year ago, I joined the Revelstoke Community Housing Society, and they have adopted this project as their own. which would ensure me the nonprofit status to bring this project to reality. What I'm experiencing is that I had this expectation that once we're a nonprofit, we'd have the ability to apply for grants that I felt were so abundant and that Revelstoke wasn't applying for. Unfortunately, what is quite available is funding and financing and support for rentals and the creation and development of rentals, but not for home ownership. And I think that there's a huge disparity there, because although rentals are very important, don't get me wrong, it's very important that people can quickly find and have a home to live in, but it doesn't at all lift that person out of poverty, low income, or even close to entering the middle class. As many of you are probably aware, over the last 60 years, incomes have literally quite stayed the same in relation to inflation and the cost of living. We've seen modest increases in our hourly wage, but when it comes to the price and cost of rentals and housing, it's gone a complete curve. So that is a systemic issue that many North Americans will continue to face right now, which I believe many of you have decided that living in a tiny home will address, and I believe you as well. And I think that those things will change pretty soon here to allow for more of those opportunities. So here is a development proposal that we're currently working on right now. This is a 3-acre parcel in the Big Eddy area of Revelstoke. It's more of a rural space. This used to be a larger 7-acre property that kind of takes this sort of number 7 shape. And currently we are working to subdivide the lot to allow us to create this 3-acre parcel. Inside this space, I really wanted to create an opportunity for phased developments. As taking on a project like this will cost many millions of dollars, I think we need to start more realistically and start, one project at a time. One that I'm very interested to follow up with and to introduce you to afterwards is Spencer, Patrick, and Allie from EcoVillages.life. They designed this beautiful, 1 or 2-story, two-bedroom unit that I really like and thought it would be cool to implement in these designs as well as a concept. But you'll see many of the same similar attributes to my last project to be implemented in this one. And from that last project I showed you, I took a percentage of square footage of that small parcel. So some allocated for housing, some allocated for gardens and green spaces, others for roads and parking, and used that as a sort of microhome concept that could be extrapolated over any parcel of land. And so I came up with certain figures for how much land we should allocate for houses, how much we should allocate for various amenities to ensure that we still have this balance of an indoor-outdoor lifestyle. And all of these beautifully shared amenities I really feel like would lift a lot of people. And so, in this sort of phase 1 design here, we'd have 7 homes and parking. As we continue to expand, possibly we have some larger residences that bring more income to develop later phases and other amenities, maybe like these A-frame units that are 700 square feet, possibly even maybe 3 bedrooms. We have other concepts that are smaller, like 560 square feet. But even though they have a small footprint, you could still build a little higher to ensure that there's plenty of space in there for a small family to live in and create opportunity. And same goes for these other units down here, where we're creating a very kind of traditional row style housing, but still parking is in an area that encourages people to connect. And being kind of the main focus of a pocket community is obviously the central community development space, which I feel is just so important for this sort of concept, as it provides many opportunities for us to connect as neighbors. So a few things, we have some open lawn space to just sort of hang out and, creatively use at our free will. But maybe we have, a parkland space here for a food forest or just general gardening area, community garden space. We have maybe a gazebo, some children play structures, and a larger shared amenity building, maybe something like this, that would allow us to have a co-working space, maybe a large kitchen and dining area, and maybe used for a daycare. I think that's something that a lot of people in Revelstoke are looking for. And this sort of government $10 a day daycare is a really great idea and should widely be accepted, but it's widely not available. And people are spending thousands of dollars a month on daycare just to maintain their family lifestyle, which I believe, could be taken care of by a few select parents or even seniors of this neighborhood to support each other. And so maybe I'll take this opportunity right now to sort of, take in some questions. I'll show you some more renderings. And if you'd like to take the mic and talk to me, I'd be pleased to answer any questions. We have about 20 minutes here before we introduce Eco Villages. So let me just pull up another design here. And I'll look through some of these questions here to see if you guys have any here. Will grants available with being a non-for-profit cause a reduction in prices to make it affordable for the low income? Yeah, that's definitely the purpose of this project. It's like, how can we use this available funding to really create opportunities for the residents in these developments? And so just recently I applied for a $70,000 grant, which was provided by our municipality, of which they got the money from the federal and provincial government for a safe COVID restart. So this is money that the federal government has recognized that all municipalities across Canada have seen delays because of their restrictions, and they're paying their local governments money to help bring us back up to speed so that we can move on with our lives here. And so $200,000 was made available, and we applied for $70,000 of it, which, to my understanding, was the unrequested leftover amount. So we went for it and asked for all of it. So that will help bring our Affordable Housing Society back into a position where they can afford to provide affordable rent for their new building they're creating. But the intention as well is to create an opportunity to use some of that funding to spend towards our pre-development process. So things like architects, engineers, site surveys, site servicing, everything we need in order to get an application into our development services department to pay for our rezoning application, which would allow us to, eventually create this development. And then once we get that rezoning application, it will allow us then to present this idea to many other investors, banks, or local community stakeholders to invest into the project to create this opportunity, of which I believe many residents in this community can actually pay for the purchase of their land and house. Sharon says, is it difficult for someone with mobility issues to get groceries from car to house when parking is so far away? So aging in place considerations. Yeah, I think that's certainly a consideration. Revelstoke, gets quite a bit of snow, so snow removal will be essential. I think, I kind of base myself on a theory of no more than about 100 feet from the house should be the location of the car. And, for many of the driveways, yeah, they're super close, but I think that this is sort of a non-negotiable aspect to this design, which I feel is so important so that people aren't rushing from their car to their front door without any opportunity of connecting with their neighbors. And like Michelle says, you could potentially drive and drop your groceries off and then park your vehicle. But yeah, I agree. One of the things that I proposed in the last design as well would be some carports. And those carports would allow you to then park in that space and not have to shovel off your vehicle, and it becomes a little easier. Thank you, Spencer, for the shout out. Looking forward to hearing your presentation as well. Dimitri says, can you share some numbers for the parcel on the old school ground? Yeah, unfortunately, that's a piece of land that's probably never going to be used for a project like this. It's an earmarked for BC Housing to develop probably seniors housing or other high impact, high density developments. So although I think it would be a very cool project in the heart of Revelstoke, it's probably not very realistic to utilize the land for this purpose. But what we could see is that with larger development spaces, we could do a lot of creative things. And so this is a project I did for Tiny Timbers, and they are looking to develop a parcel in Wisconsin to create. Yeah, Ernest, why don't I just take you in right here? Ernest wants the mic. Do you have the mic?
Hey guys, hey, thank you very much. Pretty good patient that you have there, man. I really love the idea of the tiny houses, communities, and all the information that you have shared with us. So one of the things that I asked you before, it was that you answered that those are the most of the projects that you have are on grid, but I'm asking because I've been studying and looking for different communities here in my country that I'm looking for live like off grid, growing their own food and being more like lowering the footprint. So what is your insight about the off-grid communities? Because I think it's incredible what you have done, and you have your proposal as well. But what about the off-grid opportunities as well in the same communities?
Yeah, it's a great and I think it's something that is really quite specific to the area you're developing in. And the goals of the project. You know, for example, we're trying to be as affordable as possible. And so that naturally takes out quite a lot of ideas, you know, innovative ideas that would create more self-sufficiency on the property. You know, things like geothermal could potentially heat all of the buildings from digging a big hole in the ground and pulling up the Earth's heat. And so that, you know, would be a great option, but could be quite expensive. Being that we live in a community that has a dam, electricity is our most sustainable option. And so it is probably a smart choice to connect and pay to that. And being that those are the services that are provided, it becomes the most affordable option. Other ideas like solar roofs and things like that, I think are really, really awesome and are only ever going to get better. The challenge that we experience here in Revelstoke is we've got quite a bit of snow. We have quite a bit of annual rainfall. And I'm sure a solar salesman would tell me that won't make much of a difference, but from what my understanding is that it does, and it may not be the most reliable option as well. Being as we're creating a development of housing, it's going to be very important that that everything we're proposing in this development is reliable. And so water being another really important thing. You know, Canada is really quite stringent on, you know, where you're getting your water sources from, and you know, the health and safety of your residents, which I think is something that is obviously very important. You don't want to negotiate on. But things like septic is something that we are experimenting with, and we're able to create on our last proposal an on-site septic system which would manage the entire community. Doesn't need to be pumped out either. It is a filtration bed and requires some annual maintenance, but the fees for that are really quite appropriate, and it's a tax that we won't have to pay for, as well as a development service charge for it too. Christine wants to know where I can join and move in. Unfortunately, this opportunity isn't quite yet built, but we're certainly looking to get there. I always like to think it's a year away, but it doesn't seem to be quite the case. It's a project that I'm quite passionate about and pursuing, but really a few pieces need to fall into place before we can present this. This particular project here, again, is a tiny home community. I think you can do a lot more unique things with a larger space. You can see here that utilizing every square footage of the land wasn't a huge priority for them, but that they mainly wanted to create an opportunity for people to bring and park their tiny homes on site. And so this is part of what I do as a designer, is help a landowner evaluate their land and develop a proposal that allows them to visualize their space. But most importantly, take this to the homeowners, but also the governing officials that will allow them to use this land for this purpose. And 3D models and 2D plans are an essential tool to communicating those ideas. So a lot of the same sort of ideas as well. I think naturally, many of us that are in the space think about living in a tiny home kind of in the same way. You know, this was very much their site plan layout and how they wanted to lay it out, but you can see very similar to what I was proposing, and something also very similar to what you'll see out of Spencer and Patrick in their presentation from Eco Villages. So you'll see here, you know, we've got large farm gardening spaces, opportunities for compost with, you know, tractors and whatnot, bee farming, large communal picnic space, greenhouses, shared common amenity sheds, and tiny house parking and locations for your home. Each of those lots would have their own shed, picnic table, and a gravel path to enter the space. So yeah, this was a very cool project to work on. Something that I hope gets them closer to building. And yeah, just a kind of a sneak peek into some of the work that I do. So if any of you have projects that you'd like me to have a look at, I'd be pleased to put together a proposal for you to look at, you know, what it takes to bring that project to life. This here is a company I work for out of Golden. Christine, I believe you can find these guys. They're tiny, Torch Timbers, and they do some really awesome second renovations. And this is a design I did for them that allows them to have a bedroom and a office space as well. And so this could be, you know, a sweet little Airbnb unit, but also could be a pretty sweet residence as well. And this is something that I helped them design as well in this really quite magical environment, which I hope doesn't take away from the beauty of this rendering and the home that they're creating here. Torch and Timber One is the name of the company. Torch and Timber out of Golden. Yeah, if there's anyone else, we've got a couple more minutes for some quick questions, and then I'll pass it on to our good friends over at Eco Villages. And then just in the meantime, I'll show you very quickly another project here. This is another one with an even smaller piece of land. You know, again, what can we do with our urban single family lots to create houses that are available for many rather than a few? And so again, very similar attributes as well. Shared common parking, shared common storage and gardening space, as well as this sort of courtyard design that allows an emergency vehicle to get right to the front of every door, but also provides this sort of open green space, maybe for some bocce ball or a game of volleyball. But, you know, creating this sort of aesthetic as well that, I kind of fits into a mountain town, which I think is pretty cool. And then this rendering, I chose to go with more of an artistic pencil crayon look for more of a conceptual sketch. And then you can see that we leave quite a bit of open green space in the back here, which might be great for hosting a farmer's market or having a wedding or whatever it is you want to use that space for. I think it's important that the community has the ability to dynamically use that space. Thank you, Christine. So yeah, that's one other project that I'm working on there. And then this is another concept I created, looking at, the same square footage of all these other houses I shared, but, looking at what it would look like if we created 2-story units. Now, there is certainly a fair argument for, why not connect all these houses, create more of a townhouse style development, increase the available square footage for all of the residents and maybe additional units. And I would say, yes, I think that's also a really great idea. And I think there's a lot of really great townhouse developments that address all of these other amenities that we're also proposing here. But for this concept, I really wanted to see, can we create houses that can be manufactured off site to ensure that, like also we have a lot of rain and snow, which reduces our available time and money for construction. So can we create these units off-site, maybe in 2 phases, the bottom story and the top story, and then install them on the property, which will allow them to create more affordable units. And then this particular one is a 2-bedroom house, about 700 square feet. So certainly quite a bit of space for a small family to live in. Again, shared spaces like the shed and pergola and open yard. And what I'm really trying to show here is the potential of green space that is available when you give that to a community to use and design with. Each one of them kind of taking on their own kind of unique flair, but I think it gives homeowners the creativity to, take stake and ownership in their space and be proud of the area that they have to grow in. And that's our final units. So I've got just a couple more minutes. Any last questions or things you want to ask? Otherwise, I am completely honored to be here. Thank you, Jason and Zach. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I hope I haven't been too repetitive in the last couple of years. And I hope the next time I speak with you all, I'll have some really exciting news as we maybe receive a grant and the opportunity to develop the project. Without further ado, I'm pretty stoked to introduce Spencer and Patrick, who are the co-owners of Eco Villages. They've designed some really beautiful communities, which I feel like in some respects are unique to mine. And amazingly, because of their Central American location, are actually really quite affordable. So if you're looking to buy one of these units, they're going to be available for you right now, and I'm sure they're going to be able to show you which ones are available. If you're looking for my website, my name is Adrian Giacca. You can Google me or find my website at remotelandscape.com. And otherwise, thank you very much for listening. I wish you guys all the best, and take care. Enjoy the rest of the conference. It's been an absolute pleasure. All right. Bye-bye.